A little while ago, someone asked me if I could review all of the resumes that I've had during college on this channel, and since then I've been trying to figure out what the best way of doing that would be. This is because, first off, my resumes should not be viewed as some sort of gold standards. They really just represent my skill set, credentials, and experience that I had at any given point in time in history. And second, everyone's resume is going to look a little bit different. Because I'm a computer scientist, I'll have some stuff on there, but even within computer science and then within other majors, your resume is definitely going to look a lot different than mine. And it should. So what I decided to do for this video is try to generalize my resumes enough so that it can be relatable to people of all different majors and it's not too specific into computer science stuff. But obviously I'm still a computer science major with a computer science background and skills, so if that makes sense, let's hop into it. Alright, so these first few sections of the resume don't really change a lot, so we're going to go through them pretty quickly. In the top section, we're just going to have my name, some stuff like my address, phone number, website, email address, all that good stuff. That's not going to change from year to year. Next up, the education section. Once again, this section looks pretty similar from year to year, but one of the important things to point out is on my freshman resume, you can see there is no GPA listed. When you're a freshman, you do not have a GPA. It's not automatically a 4.0. You have to get a 4.0 in your first semester before you can list that. Another thing worth pointing out is the fact that I actually still have my high school on my resume. Now, some recruiters will tell you that after a couple years you can take that off, and you definitely can, but I've kept it on for two reasons. The first reason is I was valedictorian, and I think that overall that's probably a positive thing to bring to my resume. And the other thing has been historically, when I'm trying to get jobs in Pennsylvania, I like to have that on there so people don't think I'm originally from Georgia. Especially for companies that might be worried about paying for relocation or travel stipends, it can be good for them to know that you actually live near the location that you're going to be working at, so they don't need to pay to fly you from your college. For me, that would be Georgia, up to Pennsylvania, because that's actually where I live. And one more thing I want to mention before I move on to the next section. As you can see, I do list my GPA on my resumes. Now, the general rule of thumb is if you're above a 3.0 to list it, and if you're below a 3.0, not to list it. You can also list your major GPA if that's higher, but realize if you don't list your GPA on your resume, recruiters will probably still ask for it because it's going to look like you're trying to hide something. Alright, so the next section is experience, and this is probably the section that's going to change the most while you're in college. If you're a freshman watching this, you probably don't have a lot of stuff to put in this section, but anything that you can put in here, like side projects or anything you've worked on for open source or just anything like that, is really a big win, and you want to make sure you get that on there. Looking back at my freshman resume, my experience section consisted of the 3 apps that I developed when I was in high school. These were all super basic apps, there was nothing special there, and my coding abilities have definitely come a long way since I made those applications, but it was still really good, and I was able to show it to recruiters, and it showed, hey, I'm doing something and I'm invested in it, and I've actually made stuff instead of just doing homework assignments. Something else that gets debated a little bit is whether you should put jobs in here that aren't related to your discipline. So for example, if I had a summer job working at an ice cream parlor, should I be putting that on there on my resume? Personally, I say no, but other people may tell you yes. For me, my argument is if it's not related to your discipline, then it's just taking away time that the recruiter spends looking at other parts of your resume that are hopefully more related to your discipline. However, the other argument that people make is that it shows you have responsibility, that you've worked under somebody, that you showed up and you know how to do a job. So you can go either way with this, but personally I would not include a job like that on my resume. As you can see, while I was in college, this section definitely grew a lot. After my freshman year, I was lucky enough to get an internship with Versum Materials, then the year after Lockheed Martin, and then finally Microsoft the year after that. I decided to take out the action sentences because 1, I didn't want to get too into the weeds in this video because this is not specifically for computer science majors, but then also 2, just to protect the work that I was doing at those companies, so I'm not sharing it with the whole world. Something else that's worth noting is, as you can see in my freshman resume, I was taking a lot of space to talk about my applications, and then over time that section shrunk and shrunk until finally it isn't even on there anymore. And that makes sense. You want to put the things on there that you're most proud of. Something that I developed in high school isn't really all that relevant now that I've had 3 internships. Now, the next time I release an iOS application, I might actually put that on there, but since it's been almost 4 years since I wrote an application, I'm not going to have any of them on there anymore, especially since I'd rather use that space for other things. Next up is the skills section. As you can see, when I was a freshman, this was pretty small, but not to worry, it will definitely grow over time. Also, this is my warning, don't just put buzzwords in this section, only list things that you actually have experience with, and then appropriately indicate your level of experience, whether that be proficient or familiar or expert, although I don't know how many people are really experts while they're in college. As a freshman, I did not have all that many skills, so I didn't really need to condense this section and I had plenty of space within my resume, but over time, as you can see, as that section grew, I'd adopt a different format that kind of crunched things together a little bit more while still maintaining the same idea of familiar and proficient levels of skills. Something else you might notice is that there's some skills that appeared in sophomore year and junior year that then got downgraded from proficient to familiar or just got dropped off the resume altogether. And that's because if I haven't been keeping up with a skill, I don't feel like I can still actively use it unless I actually brush up on it. And that's just good to protect you if you go into an interview, so you don't say you're proficient in something that you haven't actually touched in a year. And of course, if I started working with that language or technology again, I just put it back on the resume, and that's something important to keep in mind. It shouldn't just be one resume for the entirety of the semester or the year. As things change and as you get new skills, or as you let skills dwindle off and you don't really use them anymore, you can keep updating your resume so whatever you have is the most accurate, up-to-date representation of yourself. And finally, one last thing before I move on to the next section. Obviously, when you're in college, you're going to be picking up a lot of skills. You're going to have internships and co-ops that will also give you more skills. But if you're someone who hasn't really had a lot of experience yet and you're relatively new to college and you feel like this section is smaller than you want it to be, take the initiative and go out and learn some of those skills by yourself. There's lots of books, there's lots of websites. Even if you're not in computer science, there are lots of ways for you to grow your skill section on your own, so don't just say you're waiting around for your college classes to cover it. Go out and do it on your own. Alright, so now we're moving into what is undoubtedly the most important part of your resume, which would be your activities and your honors. Okay, obviously that was a joke, and that's not to say that your activities and your honors aren't at all important. Just realize that they're at the bottom of your resume for a reason, and they're probably not the things that are going to be getting you jobs. Taking a look back at my freshman resume, it looks like my activity section was just about the largest section on my resume. And I guess that's just because I didn't have a lot of other stuff to list, but saying that I was the concert master and that I was the secretary of National Honor Society probably wasn't really doing all that much for me with the recruiters. Looking back at it, I think the only thing on there that could be considered relevant was probably the fact that I was in Iowa's club, maybe in high school that I founded the computer club, but in reality I suppose I had the white space. I wanted to show that I was really involved in high school and I was doing all sorts of different stuff. But the truth is I was probably just detracting from the things that were actually important by putting a bunch of fluff around it. As you can see from the sophomore, junior, and senior resumes, it didn't take me too long to shrink this down, which makes sense. As other parts of your resume start to get bigger, this is a section that should be one of the first ones to go and shrink. Now, of course, there are important activities that you can put in there. Like I said, Iowa's club wasn't a bad one. I was also in Robo Jackets, and then I was in an artificial intelligence and machine learning club briefly. So those were good things to throw on there because they're actually relevant. But other stuff like being in orchestra, science olympiad, stuff from high school doesn't really need to be on there. And now moving into the honors section, as you can see, this has never been a huge section for me. Back when I was a freshman, I had a couple things that I had gotten in high school, and very quickly I took most of those off. The only one I left on was that I was a National Merit Scholar winner. Honestly, this probably doesn't need to be on there, but I decided I had the space, I would leave it on there. And it's a national level award, so it at least looks a little better than something that's more specific to my high school. The only other honor that I still have listed is faculty honors, which is given to students every time they get a 4.0. Now, obviously this is a little bit redundant since my GPA is listed at the top of the resume, but just for completeness, I do have that listed down there for the two recruiters who actually looked all the way down my resume just to see what was in my honor section. Now that we've gone through all the different individual sections of my resume, it's time to talk a little bit about some of the styling and formatting decisions that I've made. Obviously, it's a pretty simple resume. I know some people would like to do a little bit more with their resumes, but here's why I think you should do something simple. It's estimated that recruiters spend between 5 and 10 seconds on each resume. So if you have something that's a completely unique format that they've never seen before, they're gonna have to waste a couple seconds just trying to figure out what the flow of your resume is. As a result, that's a couple seconds that they could be using just to scan it. Would you rather than be trying to figure out how to read your resume or actually reading your resume? Now, I realize that there's some people who probably want to get really into the aesthetics. They want to add colors, make it look really interesting. First off, if you're actually printing in color, you're gonna spend way more money printing your resumes. I think at my school it's 5 times as expensive to print in color compared to black and white, and you're gonna be printing out a lot of resumes, so keep that in mind. But the second thing is, your resume really just needs to be simple, clean, and professional. Over the years, I've had a couple different recruiters look over my resume with me and give me pointers, and for the most part, I've gotten really positive feedback on it, and they haven't had a lot of different things that they would change. And one of the things they really liked was the formatting. It's super simple, which if you're a recruiter is something you actually appreciate. Now, I do realize that there's some other careers, especially ones that are probably more artistic minded, where you don't want a resume that looks like this because you want something that stands out. If you're one of those people, disregard this section. I realize that things are a little bit different for you, but especially if you're a more technical major, you probably don't want to be doing something that's overly colorful and over the top in terms of design. And there's two other things that I want to mention here, and they're kind of interrelated. One is you should only have one page for your resume, and the second thing is don't let your font sizes get too small. Now, if you're a freshman, you really shouldn't have any issue getting everything onto one page. However, throughout college, it can become tempting to go onto a second page. Don't. Like I mentioned before, recruiters are only spending about 5 to 10 seconds on your resume, and they don't even read the entire thing when it's one page a lot of the time. So, do you really expect them to be flipping from front to back or flipping through stapled together pages? No, they're not going to do that. What they want is a concise summary of what you've done that's important to them, not all the fluff that you decided to write down to make it look like you have 3 pages worth of interesting stuff. Now, if you're someone who's been in the industry for a long time, let's say you're 35 years old, you've had a number of different jobs, maybe it's acceptable then to go onto another page. I understand that. But we're all college students here, at least I think most of the people viewing this video are college students, in which case you should not be going onto a second page. Find a way to condense and get it onto one page. And of course, I think it probably goes without saying for most of you, but just keep in mind that you shouldn't be getting rid of all of your white space or trying to make your font super small, because if you have size 6 font on your resume, the recruiter probably isn't going to be able to read it, or they're just not going to want to. Alright guys, if you enjoyed that video, please hit that thumbs up button and feel free to share it with someone else. If you have any questions, make sure you leave them down below. And if you're new here, consider subscribing for new videos every single week. That's it, thanks for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one.